Hi, thanks for coming and listening to the podcast. We've got lots of material being introduced, lots of content coming to this channel about different aspects of the Battle of Britain. And I think that a fascinating one, which is very undercovered, is the Spitfire Fund. This is a phenomenal thing. Now, for those who don't know anything about it, it really is extraordinary. And let's just think about air power. The advent of aeroplanes and aeroplanes being used for military purposes essentially put everybody in the front line. The whole of the United Kingdom, for example, was within range of German bombers. So that meant everybody was in danger. Everybody was under threat. And everybody could be bombed. Plus, of course, the pre-war air power doctrine was all about the bomber. It will always get through. Fighters are only any use to keep up the morale of one's own people, Trenchard said. And Baldwin, the British Prime Minister, told the House that there was no power on earth could save you from the bomber. The bomber would always get through. So fighters, were the thing. And the Spitfire, coming off the back of R.J. Mitchell's Schneider trophy-winning seaplane, the S-6B, record-breaking aircraft, revolutionary design, and it was an incredible story. And the Schneider Trophy races became a matter of huge national pride between the wars. And then suddenly, off the back of all that, you've got the Spitfire, which is an all-metal, advanced design fighter aircraft that looks right today. And it certainly looked right back in 1936 when it first flew. It was extraordinary, modern looking. And with that lineage of the Schneider Trophy victories behind it, the Spitfire was a winner from the outset, and it really captured people's imagination. And the Spitfire Fund managed to harness this fascination, if you like, with the Spitfire, and channel it into a means for the home front to hit back at the Luftwaffe. Extraordinary thing that Lord Beaverbrook is credited as being responsible for, but that's not actually quite true. Now, who was Lord Beaverbrook? Well, following the German attack on the West, 10th of May 1940, Churchill became Prime Minister. And 4 days later, he appointed Lord Beaverbrook as Minister of Aircraft Production. Now, during the First World War, Beaverbrook had been Minister of Information, and between the wars, he'd founded and built up the Daily Express newspaper to have the largest circulation of any newspaper in the world. So he was a natural genius of propaganda and promotion. And Churchill wrote, "I needed his vital and vibrant energy. His personal buoyancy and vigour were a tonic. He did not fail." And that he did not is demonstrated perhaps by these figures. In the first 4 months of 1940, before formation of the National Coalition government under Churchill's premiership, 2,700 operational aircraft were delivered to the RAF. In the next 4 months, following Beaverbrook's appointment, that figure increased to 6,400. So he is a man of the moment, and he absolutely supercharged the Ministry for Aircraft Production. But the Spitfire Fund, although he latched onto it and made it what it wasn't exactly his idea. And I don't think this is very widely known. What happened was in June 1940, a Jamaican newspaper, the Gleaner, cabled the Ministry of Aircraft Production inquiring how much a bomber cost to build. And Beaverbrook decided on a round figure of £20,000. Now, this sum was soon raised by Gleaner readers, and a cheque was donated accordingly. That's an extraordinary sum of money back then. And in fact, donations like this were not new. It had happened in the First World War, with even ambulances being privately purchased and donated and all kinds of things. So a week later, the Straits Times of Singapore cabled 250,000 and the Gold Coast 100,000 to the Air Ministry. And according to Gordon Beckles, who wrote a wartime book about the Spitfire Fund, he says the affair assumed the proportion of an empire-round game played by people with a lot of money to spend. The people of England, groaning under heavy taxation, read the announcements with envious interest. But Beaverbrook's letters of thanks to these donors were prominently published in the press. Donations were not always large. Children emptied their money boxes. The elderly sent in their meagre pensions. All were acknowledged by Beaverbrook. But by the beginning of July, the newspapers, this is July 1940, the newspapers are full of notices from Beaverbrook acknowledging these donations. And this is where the Spitfire Fund really starts. Canadian mining millionaire Sir Harry Oakes, he then inquired of Beaverbrook how much a Spitfire cost. And excluding the engine, the figure was decided of £5,000. Now, in today's money, that's £350,776.30. That's a lot of money. A lot of money indeed. So, a Wolverhampton alderman in the West Midlands, Maurice Christopher, he gave a cheque of £50 to the editor of the Express and Star newspaper, suggesting that the Black Country town should raise £5,000 for a Spitfire and that will kick it off. So the paper did just that. They opened a Spitfire fund and rapidly raised £6,000. And this is it's an obvious challenge to the civic pride and patriotism of other cities. And this is how it started. So Beaverbrook, by doing nothing other than embarking upon what's been described as a colossal campaign of letter writing, had started what remains a lesson for all time in the art of propaganda. He gave the people something to do. He gave the people who were spending their days and nights in air raid shelters a means of hitting back, albeit indirectly, but it galvanised them. And the Spitfire was the thing. Now, throughout the war, there were about 1,500 Spitfires, probably more, donated. And it didn't just revolve around Spitfires. There were about 1,000 other aircraft presented, as it was called, divided into 40 different types. But the Spitfire is the main type that people wanted. That Spitfire Fund captured people's imagination. Looking at specific Spitfire funds, one of the earliest funds, July the 3rd, 1940, the Worcester Evening News and Times, again in the West Midlands, reported its decision to present a fighter plane to the government. It's a leading front page article and reference made to an appeal published that day in the Daily Express, calling upon Worcester and Wallasey, Gloucester and Greenock, Wigan and Wimbledon, and all other towns with a population exceeding 50,000 to buy a hometown aeroplane to fight for Britain. An aeroplane built with your money, named after your town. And the editor of the Worcester Evening News and Times, Mr. Ivor Griffiths, subsequently cabled the Daily Express as follows. Have read your appeal to buy a hometown aeroplane. Worcester responds and determines to buy a fighter plane carrying the city's name and coat of arms. We are cooperating with the Mayor of the city in raising necessary cash to transmit to Lord Beaverbrook. So the article goes on to appeal to firms and individuals to send their donations to either the Mayor of the city or to the newspaper. A rapid telephone inquiry among local leading firms and citizens assured the editor that enthusiastic support will be given to this effort. And 2 days later, just 2 days, the front page trumpet that the appeal had raised £2,400 on the first day alone, and that the decision to present a fighter plane had been hailed with enthusiasm by people in the city. So, from the outset, the propaganda tactics here are clear. The names of donors were to be published alongside the amount of their gift. For example, Mr. C.W.D. Perrins, one of the 4 surviving free men of the city, and if anybody likes Worcestershire sauce, it's Liam Perrins, it's that family. He gives £500. Worcester Raw Porcelain Company, very famous company, sends £50. Anonymous donation was received of £500. £250 from K&K & Company, another well-known, now gone Worcester firm. Various other figures were given by prominent local firms. But the front page article that day proclaimed that what pleased us greatly was the way small subscriptions came pouring in, and we appeal that they should continue so as to make the gift a truly representative one. The same day's back page published a letter from the Mayor of Wimbledon, acknowledging that Worcester was Wimbledon's competitor, but suggesting that the two exchanged fundraising ideas. A full list of donations ranging from £500 to pence was also published, numbering about 100 in total. And this technique of reporting, established during the first 3 days of Worcester's appeal, continued in the local paper. July the 6th, front page provides details of more major contributions and also highlights that an old age pensioner had sent in 10 shillings and a widow had donated her late husband's English lever watch. And so it goes on. It's somebody said, a schoolboy said it'll be grand to think that I paid for part of the plane by giving his pocket money. And that's the spirit of the whole thing. Wonderful. July the 10th, 1940 is the day that the Air Ministry decide that the Battle of Britain has officially begun. And that's just 4 days after this appeal has started. Great news, we've got over £5,000, but the newspaper urges people not to slacken their efforts. Lord Dudley had written in support, congratulating the people of the faithful city and remarking that their actions will no doubt be particularly encouraging to the courageous RAF. This is well timed, isn't it, with what's happening over the south coast and the Channel at the time and the air fighting, And Angus Calder, who was a scholar who wrote an absolutely monumental work, The People's War, which is mainly about the home front. He wrote that at the time Britain was shocked and faced defeat after Dunkirk and the fall of France. Let's make no mistake about that. So everybody knew that it was a crucial time. Invasion was not just threatened, but it was imminent. And the RAF were there, seen in the skies. They were the home team, weren't they? So these Spitfire funds then spring up the length and breadth of the whole country. Absolutely unbelievable. And July the 10th, we've got the Battle of Britain started on that day, according to the Air Ministry. But equally on that day, Lord Beaverbrook does an incredible thing. He appeals to the public for aluminium. Now, this is beyond extraordinary. Now, the aluminium used to make saucepans is pretty low grade. It is not aviation quality aluminium. You cannot make aeroplanes out of saucepans. But the public didn't know that. And what did the public do? Well, the appeal went, we want aluminium, and we want it now, new and old, of every type and description, and all of it. We will turn your pots and pans into Spitfires and Hurricanes, Blenheims and Wellingtons. And the public went mad. There were collection centres set up various places. I mean, just in Worcester alone, which is my hometown. So, I've studied the Spitfire Fund there when I was at university. And, housewives literally hurried in droves with pots and pans. The Women's Voluntary Service Collecting Depot at Worcester Guildhall, they received 858 saucepans, 152 kettles, 133 frying pans, and much else besides. And there are these mountains, literally mountains, of pots and pans springing up all over the country as people wanted to contribute. They wanted to do something. Absolutely amazing. And by Beaverbrook's own admission, his objective was to involve the people and make them feel they were hitting back at the enemy. Absolute genius. Genius. And this level of urgent call for aluminium, it sort of emphasised to the people the danger we were all in, the desperate plight, and that everybody had to pull together. Everybody had to contribute to this. And with Churchill's blood, sweat and tears rhetoric and the visible signs of bitter aerial combat over southern England, I mean, this is a potent mixture that's guaranteed to inspire people and inspire populations to contribute in some way, howsoever they can, to defending the country. And the Spitfire Fund gives them that opportunity. By the 25th of July, Worcester had achieved its target of £10,000. So that prompts the usual appreciative words from Lord Beaverbrook. And for a provincial city with a recorded population in 1939 of 56,000, that's no small achievement, and especially when the privations of wartime rationing and heavy taxation are also considered. These contributions to the Spitfire Fund, it just makes it even more remarkable. It's amazing. So if you look at just this Worcester Spitfire Fund, we can break it down. There are 61 private traders, 103 firms, 191 workplace collections, 164 collections in clubs, hotels and inns, and finally 36 school collections. And there was £9,923 achieved through donations, each one published in 15 separate lists in the newspaper. And then the Fighter Club contributed £415 realised from membership subscriptions and £125 from the sale of hot dogs. So it was inevitable, though, that not everybody is with the programme. Not everybody. You never, ever are you going to be able to do anything that pleases everybody. And on July the 17th, the Worcester Evening News and Times front page berated the selfish local businessman who refused to donate on the grounds that he was already heavily taxed by the government. I mean, he's got a point, but by being attacked like that by the newspaper, this individual, at the end of the day, it's his personal choice. He's contributing through his taxes, but he's being ostracised, isn't he? It's a little bit like drink driving is now. It is socially unacceptable to do that. So this is now a bit of almost like a tribal gang mentality now that, if you don't contribute to the Spitfire Fund, you're not doing your bit. So that's a really interesting spin-off from it, I think. And the editorial of August the 28th attacked Lord Dilip, who had written to the Times protesting that these gestures by the people were misplaced and their generosity could be better applied in respect of the Red Cross. Well, nonetheless, the support for the Worcester Spitfire Fund was overwhelming. And it inspired a similar appeal in nearby Malvern, which also paid for a Spitfire, and Kidderminster, Bewdley and Bridgenorth combined to buy another. The Redditch Spitfire Fund closed at 4,241. Droitwich, a very small town, 1,600. So they didn't quite get there. The Vale of Evesham also began an appeal, although there's no record of the final amount raised and there was no aircraft donated. But, you know, it's amazing. And you think about it, we've got widespread attacks on the Midlands. And this is another headline. Widespread attacks in the Midlands. Worcester, provincial town, you know, fairly central. No targets of military importance, really. But Worcester was hit by a lone Ju-88 on the 3rd of October 1940 that caused serious damage to a factory and killed 7 people, wounded, injured others. So nowhere was safe. And these attacks, you know, the pre-war thinking was that a civilian population bombed, they would lose hope, they would lose heart, morale would suffer, they would rally together to almost revolt against their government and insist on peace. Well, in fact, quite the opposite happened, as indeed the Allies found, with the strategic bombing campaign by day and night against Germany. And, you know, they're saying that these widespread attacks, you know, come on, contribute to the Spitfire Fund. This is giving us an opportunity to hit back. So what happens ultimately is March the 7th, 1941, Worcester people at last get the chance to see their Spitfire. And in fact, there were 2, City of Worcester 1, Mark 2A, P8045, and City of Worcester 2, P8046. And the Malverns was P8047 and so on. And what they used to do was roll these aircraft out where they were built, and in this case, the massive Spitfire factory, Nuffields, the Castle Bromwich airplane factory, and they roll them out and they paint in yellow paint just forward of the cockpit on the nose the name of the aircraft. And in the case of the Worcester Spitfires, they had the city's crest of arms as well. Now, it's interesting because some of these presentation things, they were a bit bogus, actually. They used to roll aircraft out, paint the name on, and then scrub it out and paint another name on. So I was advised by somebody I knew who worked at the factory. But there are plenty of photographs in existence of presentation aircraft proudly bearing those names. And there were also presentation squadrons. You know, it was usually that somebody like the East Indies, 65 East India Squadron, Treble 2 Natal Squadron, those places might contribute a couple of aircraft, or in some cases 152 Squadron, I think it was, the Maharaja Hyderabad or something like that, donates the whole squadron of aircraft. I mean, extraordinary thing. So when somebody is flying these aircraft and there's success, these things are often reported as well. Sadly, neither P8045 or 46 survived. P8045 was lost in a flying accident, and P8046 was shot down. Sergeant Clifford Jacker, 234 Squadron, shot down by anti-aircraft fire while strafing a German airfield on the Cherbourg Peninsula, and he crashes into the sea, body's washed up, he's buried at Cherbourg. Now, of course, that kind of news is not going to be reported, and it wasn't. So it was all, you know, all Worcester people and people anywhere else knew was that they bought these Spitfires and off they went, and then they never really heard too much else about them. It's been post-war that the histories of the individual aircraft have been researched and published and shared, and it's an interesting thing. So in total, there are about 14 million contributed to the Ministry for Aircraft Production, which paid for 1,500 aircraft. And Calder, again, who I rate highly as a historian of the home front, he wrote that, in sober truth, money was now quite irrelevant to the production of fighters, but the pennies and pounds which were contributed had a useful anti-inflationary effect. So that's fine, but that really is a bit clinical, and it overlooks and I think misunderstands the real measure of the contribution made by the Spitfire Fund. And that is absolutely that to countless men and women, Lord Beaverbrook provided an easy way to a more personal stake and interest in the war, and to make an enthusiastic contribution in the waging of it and the defence of this country. And it really provided a link between the factories, the public and the Royal Air Force. And that in itself is a powerful stimulus to morale as well as production. We're all in it together. This is absolutely brilliant. And Alan Wood, who was Beaverbrook's biographer, he considered this to be Beaverbrook's most successful propaganda coup. And I don't think anybody could argue that, It's absolutely amazing. So it goes on that there's just so much made of all of this at the time, and the Spitfire Fund story and these, give us your pots and pans and these mountains of aluminium. I really do think it's absolutely amazing. And it started during the Battle of Britain. So there we go. That's something else about the Battle of Britain that people probably don't always think about. Lots of these presentation aircraft, they really start appearing in numbers, in 1941 with the Spitfire Mark II. So, it's not something that we necessarily connect with the Battle of Britain, but it started in the Battle of Britain in that darkest hour. So there we are. My very enthusiastic take on the Spitfire Fund. I'm a big fan of it. And I hope you're a big fan of our podcasting and videoing. And if you like what we do, please subscribe to the channel. It's free. And also, love feedback, any ideas, any suggestions, things you'd like me to talk about, film a video about. The idea is that with the weather getting better in England, should be out and about making some films outdoors. So that'll be more interesting than perhaps me just sitting at my desk talking. But there we are. That's the plan. So thanks for listening, and don't forget the Spitfire Fund.